Hi, my name is Alan Rutberg. I'm Director of the Center for Animals and Public Policy, and I'd like to welcome you all in the room and online to the second in our Animal Matters series on animals and art. And today we have Dr. Ellen Rogers, who is a graduate of the Cummings School, who became inspired early on in her career and started going to Africa between her first and second year as a vet student here, and has since transitioned to art. And there seems to be an interesting nexus, and we will have another speaker in April who is another DVM who has moved into the art world, and so I'm interested in exploring this more. So welcome, Ellen, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. So I am a veterinarian. I graduated in '96 from this very school. And this talk is going to be about three things: my transition from veterinary medicine to art, examining the meaning behind some of my artwork, which reflects on Africa and animals, and some ideas about future projects, future art projects, maybe with Tufts connections, I hope. If showing your artwork does not terrify you, you're doing it wrong. That is my motto when it comes to art. Art is personal, even if it may not seem that way to the audience. Good art bears the soul of the artist. This talk is going to be quite personal, both about my life and about the artwork. And I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that we can have a little fun with it as well. When you're writing, if you're a creative writer, there's a little way to explore characters, and it's called How to Be. And you go through the most important aspects of your character. So I'm going to go through How to Be Ellen. First of all, love animals. First to last, animals are my passion. Find peace in nature. The natural world has more beauty in it than any museum. Have a compulsion to make things, whether it's wooden sculptures when you're in middle school, or bars of soap when you're 3 years old, carving it with a butter knife. Have childhood dreams of Africa. And I was just talking about what had inspired me as a child to think about both animals in Africa. I'm a little embarrassed about the first two. Wild Kingdom, for those of you who are not dating yourself by talking about it, and Born Free. These were, to me as a child, the most inspiring things ever. Looking back now with a little more, a little less naivete, let's put it. They're pretty horrible stories. They're edutainment, and as a conservationist, probably not the best thing that ever happened. However, they really imprinted on my soul. And of course, Dr. Jane Goodall, who at the time that I was a child, her first documentaries were coming out, and they were the most amazing thing I had ever seen. So be the black sheep of your family, but go to Tufts Vet School. Not so bad, Ellen. Grow up in Massachusetts, work in Africa, and really wish you'd blend in, because I never did. This was when I was putting together a wildlife course with the Ugandan vet school for Tufts. I'm afraid a lot of you are going to be in this situation, be overeducated, and make no money, but have priceless experiences.
Here, Cobus and his team will attempt to implant a microchip in the horn of a rhino as a form of permanent identification to counter the threat of poaching. The rhino sought by the team was spotted from the road. They must cautiously approach the animal on foot to dart him.
White rhinos are not the best animals to stalk on foot. They are big animals and they're dangerous. I've never done this before and I'm a little bit nervous. You're not really sure what it's going to do. Is it going to come toward you? Is it going to run away? You have to be prepared for either thing. And there's no way to predict ahead of time really what's going to happen.
The vets will need to approach this male very cautiously. Although rhinos may have poor eyesight, their senses of hearing and smell are extremely acute.
I'm coming thinking, great, I can watch him dart it. This is going to be fantastic. Just as we're getting set up, Cobus hands me the gun.
Okay, it's your first rhino. Come on.
And I think he's kidding, but he's like, no, really. We have maybe one chance at this, and if I miss, we may not be able to catch this animal.
Go down. Mind that branch. In the middle of the bum.
I'm thinking, please don't let me miss.
Fire. Yes. Come back. Come back. Behind us. Okay.
The rhino got some idea of where we were, and he came toward us. I didn't know, do we run? What are we doing? I'm waiting for Cobus, and he's saying, back up, okay, hold on. Okay, back up. Being able to make that judgment call when maybe there's not always a lot of time is really part of what makes him so special.
As they approach the rhino, the capture team will try to keep the animal calm by using a blindfold and earplugs to dull the animal's senses.
They don't understand who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, or even that we're trying to help. All they know is we're humans and they're scared of us. You always have to keep in mind they are wild, they're not pets, and they're dangerous.
That was pretty exciting.
You haven't done that too often before.
Never.
Okay, as an aside to that, when we finished with that rhino, the producer of the TV show came up to me and said, "Thanks for ruining it, Ellen." And I was like, well, I darted the rhino. How did I ruin it? And this was in South Africa. He said, you were supposed to miss, and then your boss could show you how it was done. Because everyone knows women can't shoot. Yes. He was a charmer. So back to how to be Ellen. Work with animals that you dreamed of as a child. Normally when I give a talk like this, it's not an animal-based audience. It's usually art-based. And I make a bet with the audience. And I say, if you guys can name every animal I show, I will buy a round of drinks for everyone. Now, I know better than to do that with you guys, but because you're far more educated about animals than the average Joe. But what animal is this? That's right. What animal? Okay. Can you tell? Okay, what kind of rhino? Black? Nope. White. You only had 2 choices for Africa. And why is it white? Because the lips are wide. That's how you know. Wild dog, thank you. Almost every audience says hyena. Yep. Very good, you guys. What kind of cheetah? No, it's a little bit of a trick question. This is called a king cheetah. It's the same species. It just happens to have very different markings, and they're much more prized than the average cheetah. Here's a regular cheetah on the left and a king cheetah on the right. The genetics, at least at the time I was working in Africa, they hadn't been completely understood, and it was kind of a random mating to try to get this type. Can you show what it is? Maybe not. Cape buffalo. Yep, African buffalo. Louder, I can't hear. This is one of my ringers. This is how I avoid buying drinks. That's a domestic cow. In fact, it's my cow. It's an Ankoli cow that was given to me in Africa by a herdsman who was so happy that, and I'm quoting, a woman, an American woman, a white American woman would be interested in the diseases of his cows. And so he gave me one. By now, I probably have a whole herd. My second ringer. Can you see it? It's a full-grown antelope. They'll never get it. It's a Sunni, S-U-N-I. Tiny, tiny little antelope. And that's why I never have to buy drinks. Okay, so I had this amazing lifestyle. I was darting rhinos, wrestling lions, and doing, the wild kingdom life. But how to be Ellen, have everything change. Have life as you knew it end. Become a prisoner inside your own body. And for those of you who are able-bodied and healthy and young, you probably can't imagine it. But I had to leave veterinary medicine because I could no longer practice. And I don't even mean running after giraffe or whatever. I could no longer leave my house much of the time. And it was more than just being ill. So this is a little dramatic, but this is how it felt. Have a wave of destruction move through your life, leaving only scorched earth in its wake. Imagine if you had to give up who you thought you were, every aspect of it. What would you do? What if you couldn't be a vet? What if you couldn't go through a master's program? This is how I felt. Be forced to shed the skin of your old life. But eventually I started to dream of something new. Dream of art school, but put it off. Have a friend, the one most like you in terms of work, but least like you in terms of personality in many ways. Give you some advice at this point in your life. Enjoy life. We do not get to do it over. Speak at her funeral a month later. This was Dr. Annalisa Kilbourne, one of my classmates, who died in a plane crash in Africa. And that was the kick in the butt I needed. So dream of art school and actually go. And use all those experiences you had in Africa, good and bad, to make art. And to talk about animals, of course. One of the things I use art for is to reflect on how we, here in the US, see animals, and how, in many ways, we see a Disney version of animals often through the media. And I don't mean the people in this room because you are very sophisticated when it comes to animals, but the general person watching Animal Planet sees a very distorted view often. And now we're going to start to talk about actual pieces of art. And when I was in art school, I started thinking about this distorted view that people bring, not even just when they're in the US, but what they bring to Africa when they're there. Often sees animals more as toys than actual beings. And if you look at this ad, here's this little girl. It's an ad for a credit card. Vacation you'll never forget, priceless. And look, she's got a little stuffed zebra. She has a zebra headband. And look, Mommy and Daddy bought me this, herd of zebra to look at, rather than seeing them as actual animals. So I wanted to make this is a quote that I made up. Nothing like quoting yourself, right? If all you ever knew about mice was what you learned from Disney, think about Disney and mice. Why would you ever want an animal that bites you and poops in your hand when you pick it up? Biting and pooping is reality. All the other stuff you see from Disney, that is fantasy. So I wanted to make something that talked about this toyification of animals that I had worked with, that I had great respect for, but people who didn't have my experiences often wanted to see them more as entertainment. So this is just a picture of a rocking horse, and I wanted to go from that idea. Rocking horse, child's toy, everybody knows it, everybody's familiar with it, and I wanted to use a giraffe because they're one of my favorite animals. So this is what I came up with. This is a model. It's a rocking giraffe. This is a very small, it's about 11 inches high, made of steel. But I didn't want just a little thing to put on a table. I wanted something people could experience. And this is what I made. It's a rocking giraffe. This is a little girl on it, smiling. And you can't see her feet, but she's actually sitting on it. I made it, though, not for children. I made it for adults. And it was interesting because the same thing would happen over and over. I would convince somebody to get on it. Yes, it's strong enough to hold you. It's held 300-pound guys. You can get on it. It's safe. And they would get on it, and they would rock forward good enough, and then they would start to rock back. And the way I had made the rails at the bottom, it could not flip backward, but it would feel like it would flip backward, and everybody would scream and laugh and had this look of joy, childhood joy on their face. And it didn't matter who was doing it, always this, oh my God, this is just like childhood. And that picture of joy every single time. And here's just a comparison of the joy of the chimp and my professor. So is this a success or a failure as an artist? Everybody loved it. Loved it. Not one person got the irony of animals and toys, because I was trying to speak to an audience like this, and my audience was a completely different set of people. So success as something that was enjoyed, but failure as getting an idea across. There's a term, the duplicity of the image, that we use in art. And it's talking about looking at a picture like this where we see wild nature and untouched by human hands. Those are words I'm taking from safari outfit advertisements. And that's what we see, right? That's what you see. But it's a lie, because somebody was there taking a picture. Somebody was there, a human was there with their equipment, with a vehicle to get there, probably with other people. And that's the duplicity. We see what's in front of the camera, even though we know there's all sorts of different stuff behind the camera. Think of the show Survivor, if that's still on, or Naked and Afraid. These people surviving in the wilderness. Well, then they're alone. Who's filming them? Of course, there's, you know, hundreds of people behind it. But we see this duplicity of the image. And I started thinking about, well, you know, when people come to Africa, they're sold this idea of true wilderness, pristine, Garden of Eden, untouched by human hands. And they seem to believe it. This is, again, from a safari advertisement. And if you think about it, do you actually think that wilderness, pure wilderness, has animals that are not frightened by humans? Has vehicles? Has rich tourists? Has five-star lodges? And the tourists I met did seem to think they were actually experiencing wilderness. And I call this duplicity of the experience. They are buying what they're being sold, even though it's completely made up. And I wanted to make a piece of artwork related to this. And again, giraffes, because I love giraffes. And we're going to go really quickly through a giraffe capture. And you're all going to be experts. So when you're doing a giraffe capture, what do you need first? You need a helicopter, because you need to go up in the air and actually find the animal. You need a dart gun. You're going to dart from the air because you can't follow a giraffe by vehicle if they want to run away from you, but you can by helicopter. You need radios to talk to your ground crew. You need vehicles if you're going to move this animal. So this is a picture of a giraffe that's been darted and is being affected by the drug. And how can I tell that? It's because its head is back and its chin is up and it's running kind of funny. And that's what they do when they've been affected. There are some people on the ground here that you can probably see, and they are the runners. And they have to be very fast runners. Between the three of them, they have a rope, and their job is the fastest guy runs in front of the giraffe and around it, and they actually encircle the giraffe's legs with a rope and trip it. Now, why would you want to trip this animal that you're trying to take care of? Well, giraffes are very sensitive to anesthetics. And the idea is to get them down as fast as possible, get your hands on the animal, and get them partially reversed so that their breathing improves, so they don't regurgitate, and get them back on their feet as soon as you can. All right, so you're going to need a bunch of people. This is not a one-person endeavor. Trip them, get them down, keep their heads up, try to keep them from regurgitating. We're putting a blindfold and a halter on this giraffe's head. Get them back on their feet. Now, he's still sedated, but he's no longer in danger of dying from the anesthetic the way he would be if he were on the ground. And you see that there are some ropes and such along with the halter. That halter actually lets you lead the giraffe toward the vehicle. Generally, the vehicles can't get anywhere near the capture because they're huge vehicles, the roads only go so far, and the terrain can be very, very rough. So what you need to do is now, instead of getting the vehicle to the animal, you want to get the animal to the vehicle. And you literally walk the giraffe to the vehicle. He's sedated enough that he's not upset, he's not going to hurt himself, and he's being pulled at the head. The ropes on the body help turn him until you actually get to wherever you need to go. You get to the vehicle. Now, this is a trailer that's specially made for giraffe. In South Africa, they do a lot of giraffe captures, and a lot of movement of these animals. It's called a chariot because once the giraffe is in, he looks like he's on a chariot. It's got the wheels underneath him, and you can tow that trailer wherever you need to go. Now let's think about what I just told you. All this equipment, helicopter, fuel, guns, drugs, all these people, ropes, etc. All of this is being done in order to manage nature, keep nature looking natural. And this is done in parks all over Africa. It's gotten to the point where what we call wilderness can no longer survive on its own without human intervention. And it was this intensive management that I want to talk about in my next piece. So you have human, you have animal, and you have machine. Those are the three parts I want to talk about. And this is what I came up with. You see the three parts? So head and body are giraffe. Legs are those human, a ballerina. And the wheel, the machinery in the back. What looks like mesh that forms the actual structure of the animal is actually slices of pipe, 1.25 inch pipe, sliced at 1/4 inch. So you have circles, rings of steel. And these rings of steel were individually welded, hundreds, probably thousands, into place by hand. And I did this freehand. I didn't have a mold that I was doing it over. I just did it in place. And why ballerina? If you've ever seen a giraffe run, they are beautiful. They are so graceful. And they are so big, and you would think clumsy, but they are not. They are like dancers on their toes. And the wheel, of course, the machinery. You'll notice that the wheel and its rails are propping up the giraffe. Neither can exist and function without the other. So again, the three parts. And those who study science know the term chimera, where you have cells of two different organisms that form a single animal. I call this a trimera because it's three parts. Completely lost on my art school audience, I have to say. The funny thing as an artist is your art can sometimes surprise you. You, the creator, your art surprises you. This piece, I eventually, right now it's rusted in this picture. I painted it black, very shiny black, and Colgate University leased it to install at their president's house. And they very kindly made a concrete pad for it and lights for it. And when I first saw it at night, I could not believe it. This is what it looked like. It looked like glowing glass or something. And again, how could something I created surprise me so much by how it looked? We'll return to this with another art piece I did. All right, quickly we're going to talk about elephants. You guys are probably all aware that there's currently a war on elephants going on in Africa, where the ivory from their tusks is so prized that people are going out and poaching elephants at record numbers, driving down the herds of elephants, and it's so lucrative that they outman the rangers and such that try to protect the parks. It's a paramilitary operation where they have helicopters, they have dart guns, they have chainsaws. What are the chainsaws for? They literally cut the tusks off the elephants, whether they're alive or dead yet. I'm not going to show any of those pictures because they're so incredibly gruesome. And I started thinking about, well, what will we be left with if elephants in the wild go extinct? What if we don't actually have the animals themselves? And with this Disneyfication of animals in general and this trend toward looking at animals as toys, I was trying to find out what is the essence that we as humans see as elephant. And I wanted to make something that was boiled down to that very essence. Oh, sorry, this is an elephant captured, not dead. I don't usually show these pictures because I know they look dead. This is an elephant translocation to a safer place because of poaching threats. They'll both be woken up and totally fine. So this is what I started coming up with for the essence of what is an elephant. Just simply these lines in space. And is this what we're going to be left with? So I came up with different options. Experimentation. Art is all about experimentation. This is an elephant made out of acrylic. It's about 2 inches tall. But wouldn't you love to see that as a large-scale sculpture? Shouldn't Tufts commission that? Yes, it should. And I made a lot of these small models. And eventually, Colgate University, again, commissioned me to make a large-scale one. Well, I had been working with solid steel, bending it, heating it, bending it, welding it. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this when the thing is 6 feet tall and 10 feet long? So we ended up doing something hollow. I say we, I had a crew. I couldn't do this all on my own. And this is the start of it. We've had this steel cut to shape and bent, et cetera. This is, it's upside down, you can see, but it still kind of looks like an elephant, even without the legs. And here it is standing. It's not yet painted. And this is a very unflattering picture of me doing some of the touch-ups on it. And you can see, if you look on my left leg, a big burn from welding earlier. Not the ideal situation, but. And this is what it looks like. It's about to be shipped to Colgate from Buffalo, New York. And the guy standing on the flatbed is the driver. He usually did normal cargo, and he was so excited to have a sculpture he could take. And he said that he got a lot of interesting looks on the way there. This is I hate to say this, but final resting place of this piece. It's in a sculpture park now. And the woman who commissioned the elephant originally was very, very pleased with it until she looked at the title. And the title of the piece is Requiem 1, Elephants. And she said, oh, I like to think of elephants as happy and free and wild. I don't like to think of them as dying. And I said, well, I don't like to think of it either, but guess what? That's happening. So this is a piece where, again, perhaps my intention did not come through. But if you look at it closely and read the title, perhaps at least people in this room would understand it. All right, I'm going to talk about some future projects that I would love to do, especially with Tufts. Oh no, another movie. One second. So I'm going to show you a very, very short video. It's 1.5 minutes. And it's a piece I did last year for Memorial Day. So it has nothing to do with animals. It's called Remember Our Fallen. And in this piece, I took the names of the US military personnel who have died in the ongoing Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and I wrote them out, each one on its own banner. You can do it now. Okay. So there are almost 7,000 names, 7,000 US military personnel who have died. And I use this to give people a way to visualize that number. We can't conceive of 7,000 in our heads, but we can get some idea of how many that is when we look at this piece. Okay, so why am I showing a piece about Memorial Day? Well, I would love to do a similar piece where instead of names of soldiers who have fallen, it were names of species that have gone extinct because of humans, to give us an idea of the scope of the changes we're making on the earth. I talked earlier about art surprising the artist, and this is one of the pieces that did that. So I had envisioned the size of it and how it would move in the wind. What I didn't envision was how it would sound. And when it was breezy, it sounded like whispers. And everyone who came to this mentioned that to me. The sound was so eerie. It was so emotional. And I think that sound also would be a big part of the extinct species project that I would love to do. Another one is with radiographs. I think that X-rays, for those of us who are not veterinarians, they're beautiful, gorgeous. And Tufts has decades of images of animals from the wildlife clinic. And there are so many that tell a visual story. You don't have to be a veterinarian to know that this snake had something going wrong with it. It's swallowed these balls. Or that turtle on the right is having a really bad day because there's that hook that it has also swallowed. And I envision selecting radiographs that tell a stunning story, blown up, kind of like these, backlit in a darkened room, so the audience can come in and without even knowing what happened to this animal, they can just see how we are touching the wildlife right around us. You don't have to go to Africa. It's happening right here. And finally, this is a mural project that I would love to do. These are little models. We all know DNA is coded in letters, A, C, G, T. And I think that it would be much more interesting if it were coded in patterns. And so I made up a code where if you know the key to the code, you can read it. And you probably can't see, but this is a comparison of human and chimp DNA. And right here, probably can't see it very well, it has a little red circle. That's where there's a difference in this particular gene. There's one nucleotide that's different. So I think that this is both stunning in just seeing the pattern. Look how beautiful that is. And that's DNA. Stunning to see, and also to give us some idea of how closely related we are to a lot of animals, particularly primates, particularly our closest relatives. Okay, we have a couple minutes, good. This is a fire that you can see often in Africa at night, people burning grassland, and they burn it because they want to get rid of ticks. And you see this scorched earth left behind, which I mentioned, looks completely dead, nothing could live there. But actually, it causes regrowth. And within weeks, you see this green coming back. At the time I was thinking about this, I was playing around with these one-legged creatures, both human and antelope. And I wanted to make one that personified this burning and regrowth. So I took one of my antelope sculptures. This is it coming out of the mold. It's made of paper pulp, which is like paper mache, but instead of layers, it's shredded, finely shredded paper. It's actually the cellulose stuff you blow into attics to insulate them, mixed with glue and water, and then put it in a mold. And to get the idea across, I had to burn it. So I took a blowtorch, the kind you use to actually cut through steel, and I burned this baby. And it took forever. I burned it, and I burned it, and I burned it until, it's not even done there, until it was just covered in a fine, fine soot. So beautiful. Then I woke up to reality that I actually have to move the sculpture around, and all of that soot is just going to come off. So I had to cover it in oil, but it's still blackened. This is the actual sculpture. And the burning had revealed pockets of air, and I put plants in there and let them grow. And it wasn't until I was actually putting this talk together that I thought, you know, maybe this is a metaphor for my own life. I talk about the scorched earth when I went through a very, very bad period. And maybe art in itself has allowed me to sprout again, regrowth, destruction before rebirth. You can see the sculpture right here. It now only has artificial plants in it because it had to go into storage for a long time. But that's what I have for you, and I want to thank you guys. And I want to ask if you have any questions. Also, people are welcome to come up and look at the sculptures. There are 2. Touch them, whatever you'd like. Thank you very much. Yes?
I got your point about the sort of toyification of animals was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the way people view like Africa also as well as the animals, and how you think your work plays into sort of, or factors into or deals with ideas that Americans often have about Africa as an untouched place, or Africa as one giant thing that just looks like the Lion King instead of 54 very different countries.
Yeah, I don't know if you got my handout, but the handout has a lot of the theory behind it, behind what I'm talking about. I don't think that my work gets that message across very well. I've tried to do some things dealing with African people and foreigners, and the message has not come across well. It's something I should revisit because I feel strongly about it. It's, because of the history of Africa and both diseases that have gone through the continent, human and animal, when the colonial powers first came in, there were very few people. And that was because most of them had been killed by either starving to death due to rinderpest, killing their animals, or smallpox or other diseases that brought in. So unless you know that history, you tend to buy into this myth, this colonial myth of untouched, even though that's where humans evolved. It's a hard message to get across. Most people, frankly, aren't that interested. They're interested in safaris, in tourism, in animals, but the plight of the people, it's pretty hard to sell. Unless you go there and you see the poverty yourself. I try, but I'm not sure I'm very effective. Other questions? Yeah, in the back.
How do you think the way Americans or people in any other Western country perceive African animals differs from the way that people in South Africa who are native to the area view African animals?
Oh, so differently.
I actually had the opportunity to attend Corvus Crafts.
Did you?
Yeah, conservation medicine course many years ago. And what I learned from that was that, or at least what I took away, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, was that the people that live there feel very differently and perceive those animals very differently than Americans do.
I think it depends on which population of people you're talking about. When you say South Africans, that there are very distinct groups. And especially when I was there, I can't say what it's like now. I was there very soon after apartheid ended, so after white rule ended. And in the wildlife world, it hadn't really ended at that time. So if you talk to, I'm using the terms whites and blacks because that's what they use. If you talk to a white South African, and what they thought of the animals. That was going to be very, very different than from a black South African. And partly because of the resources they had. You know, you can only really appreciate wild animals when you're fed, you're safe, your children are healthy, et cetera. And if a lion is threatening your children or your livelihood, you're not going to see it as a thing of beauty. You're going to see it as a thing of danger and want to get rid of it. Just like it is in this country in some ways. If we ever have a mountain lion kill a person, I mean, the furor over it and the hunting that animal down, it's no different there. Just a lot more people are exposed, I would say. Does that make, does that go with what Cobus told you?
Yeah, I think that's, I found, I had never even considered that, you know, that there were different groups of people.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I found it to be a very enlightening concept.
Mm-hmm.
An amazing concept.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to do with race. If you look at Yellowstone National Park, oh my God, I love that as an example. How did the farmers, the ranchers feel about the bison coming out of the park? They hate them. They carry disease. They threaten their livelihood. But the ranchers have a voice. And that's the difference between here and there, is that generally the poor Africans living around parks don't have a voice. And they can't say, I don't want this. Because the money is from tourism. Felicia, would you say that's correct from what your experience is?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking of a story that Chris tells, Chris Whittier, professor here for a long time, about he did a semester abroad in Tanzania. And he took a zoology class, and he was all excited to learn about lions and all the African animals and his childhood imagination. And all of the other Tanzanians that were in the class were like, yeah, lions and kudu and whatever. Are there really such things as bears? Because there's no bears.
Yeah.
They just wanted to hear about bears from this American guy that grew up in New Hampshire and had black bears in his backyard. I mean, it was just, so it's that kind of first introduction we have to the different perceptions, and depending upon where you come from and what your experience is interacting, the different ways of being animals. But yes, I mean,
Yeah.
if you are at risk, you know, either your livestock or your crops or yourself, you know, from animals, then you see it very differently as a threat or an annoyance. And we have the same thing here, but we just, most of us are fairly separated from that. We have the luxury of sort of seeing them as beautiful, as a resource to protect them and conservation and all that. But
Yeah.
yes, it's really instructive and important that we become aware of these different perceptions and experiences of things that are important to us.
I know some people have to leave. Feel free to do that, but I have a couple other things to mention about this and the perceptions of wildlife and such, so don't feel bad if you have to get up and go. Two things I would like to add to that about how people feel differently about animals. One is, in this country, you can hear people complaining about deer. The damn deer ate my rosebuds, you know. Well, deer are wildlife and perhaps not managed the way we would like, but you know, some people would find them incredibly beautiful instead of vermin, I guess is the right word. And the second is, I had a very moving experience for my second trip to Africa, where I was treating some baby orphan chimps at a zoo, and I was treating them for parasites. And one of the Ugandans who I was friends with came up and asked me a very difficult question. Why are you giving medicine to the chimps when my baby is sick? Why aren't you giving medicine to me? And how do you answer something like that? It's very difficult, and it strains your priorities, strains your ideas of where are your priorities. So it's a tough question when you see the suffering and unbelievable, unimaginable poverty that exists. Any questions about the artwork?
Someone online asked, how can I ride your giraffe?
How can you ride my giraffe? Oh, my giraffe no longer exists. The difficulty with being a three-dimensional artist is storage. And I have moved probably 5 times since I built it, and it was just too difficult to move. So I still have the head as a little trophy, but the rest of it is gone. I can make a new one if somebody wants to pay me. Any other questions? I accept animal questions as well. No? All right, well, thank you all so much for being here. And my contact info is up there, and feel free to contact me anytime. Thanks.